Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. Hey everybody, so I am done with my reading for 2023, and I thought it'd be really fun to do a recap of every single book that I read this year, ranking them from the worst to the best, and copying the style that I did last year. I'll put a link up here so you could watch that if you'd like to, where I talk about each book, but I have a hard cap of 30 seconds per book. So even if I'm in the middle of a sentence, I have to stop talking and move on. And we'll see if I can avoid going insane throughout this process. So let's start this thing off. I've got my trusty little timer right here. And here we go. So number 110 is The First Binding. I gave this one a 0 out of 5. It's the worst book that I've ever read. Not just from the quality, I hated the quality, but it's literally just a direct knockoff of The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Scene for scene, everything that happens in this book, from pretty much this first page to the last, especially on the first page, but all throughout this thing, every scene is like the same thing. It blows my mind that this thing somehow passed getting through. This is gonna drive me crazy. All right, number 109. Oops, I need to go back. All right. Number 109 is ''Circe" by Madeline Miller. I gave this a 1 star. And this is a book that I read really recently, and it was just like a horrible bastardization of Greek mythology, something that I love, and made for it almost felt like a teenage YA romance crowd. It was weird mashup. And boring. Nothing happens, especially Circe is this character that just gets stuck on an island for the whole book. God damn it. All right, now number 108. This is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff, an author that I still think that I love because he wrote Empire of the Vampire, and I really love that book. But Nevernight was just really, really bad and awkward. I mean, there's these weird sex scenes in it. It's about this kind of assassin girl that it's just so awkward and painful, and the writing style is just horrific. I mean, it's just the way that he describes scenes, and it just... Is that really 30 seconds? That's not 30 seconds, is it? What? It felt like 10. All right, 107. This is Whispers from the Poisoned Isle. This is the most recent book from the 𝐒𝐿 series, a series that I will not be reading anymore. Every book in that series I like less and less. I feel bad for saying this because the author, Travis Riddle, is the only author that I've ever interviewed on my channel, and I liked him a lot when channel first started coming out. It's like a Pokemon-inspired fantasy story. It's just, the writing's not really good, and it's straying away from what I really wanted out of a fantasy story, and going into this weird... it's making me mad. Number 106 is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I feel really bad about this one because I love Mark Lawrence. He's a really cool guy that runs this 𝗣𝘁𝗋 competition. I don't have time to say what that is, apparently. But I just didn't. I hated it. I get why people like it. It's the one I feel most bad about because this style's just not for me. I mean, the way that this is written on this kind of weird, trying to piece it all together and what's real and what's not. It's not a style that I enjoy at all. I want things a little more... I'm getting mad. Gotta go faster. Come on, Matt. 105 is Black Sun. I have no idea who wrote this. I didn't read very much of it. I read probably 15% of it, and then I stopped. I probably shouldn't even count reading this as a book, but yeah, I was so lost. Not because it's so complicated, but I was just so bored. I was doing this in audiobook, which probably didn't help. Maybe I should give it another shot, but because maybe I'll find something I like it. But it just... I was struggling to stay awake, and while driving, that's a really tough thing to do because I want to be awake when I'm driving. I guess that's true. That's rough. 104 is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Hated this one. I went in with a different expectation about what it would be, but even if I went in with the right expectation, I just hate it. It's overly violent, and I like violent books, but it felt like violent just for the sake of being violent. It's so pretentious in the way that it doesn't use any, commas or punctuation. It's why would you ever do that? And how can people think this is a wonderfully written book if it doesn't do basic things that are needed to make a book make sense? I had a lot more to say. 103 is The Way of Shadows. And yeah, this one I kind of thought I was going to ended up getting a nice assassin story. Almost like every assassin story I end up reading doesn't end up really having assassinations in it. But yeah, it just didn't work. I mean, the character wasn't cool enough. The characters in general weren't interesting enough. The plot was going at a snail's pace. That's a problem for me. I'm okay with a snail's pace. I don't have time for that. What am I talking about? I'm going crazy. 102, The True Bastards. This is a follow-up to The Grey Bastards by Jonathan French. And yeah, I really liked the first one. Well, didn't love it, but I liked 4 stars probably. I liked it. This one went in a different direction. It had a different POV character. I kind of had this expectation about where the story would go. It did not go there. It went in a totally different direction that I was not feeling in the slightest. And yeah, didn't like it. And I'm going to end that review early. Look at me. I'm on fire right now. Okay, next up is number 100. Number 101. This is The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. I take it back. This is the one I feel most bad about. I DNF'd it, which is most of what my 1 stars are. It just didn't work at all. It was so slow, painfully slow. It's this old fantasy story that's a classic. I'm pretty confident that if I ended up reading the thousands and thousands of pages in the series, I'd end up getting to stuff that I really liked and hooked. But reading like 500 plus pages in a book and then not really having anything that really interests me is not what I want out of a fantasy story. Feels like 30 seconds. I'm getting better at this. Number 100 is Triceratops and Bottoms. This is a book I read for April Fools about a woman who goes back in time to go have sex with a bunch of dinosaurs. How is it better than a lot of these other fantasy books? It's not better, but it's funnier. At least I got some enjoyment out of it, which is why I give it 2 stars. Because at least I had some fun and laughing at how preposterous the story is. And it's really short, so it didn't like wear its welcome. It was like less than 100 pages. Got through it in like an hour. And yeah, very funny. I don't know if I'd recommend it to anybody. 99 is The House of Earth and Blood. This is the first book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. I just wasted most of my time. I had to read this because it was a Patreon wheel pick, and I had to read it. And I don't like romantic stories. Now, this didn't have a lot of romance in it. I think I just don't like the way Sarah J. Maas writes. It's just like cursing every single page. Totally, what am I looking for? Man, I wasted all my time thinking of this word, and I'm not going to think of it. That's going to drive me crazy. Angsty? No. God dang it. Number 98, The Gunslinger by Stephen King. I don't like Stephen King, and I've come to found that through several books, but it really exemplified itself in reading his magnum opus in the fantasy scene of whatever the heck it's called, the something. I don't have time. And this is a weird book. It like wasn't supposed to be a book. It was like written to a magazine in like several installments. It didn't really have a really big plot on going for it, and it was just a strange book from start to finish. Not my kind of thing. Yeah, I know what 30 seconds is, don't I? And on that train, 97 is The Drawing of the Three, the next book in it. A book that I liked slightly more, not much. And because it had some plot going for it, it was just very strange. It did that classic Stephen King thing where it's like he very clearly doesn't know where he's going with the story. He clearly just sits down, snorts a lot of blow, and writes and writes and writes, and is like, oh, let me just go in this direction. And who knows if that'll work? Who knows if it connects in the book at all? I'm just going to write because that's what I do. Now, I respect it, kinda. I'm not really a drug person. 96, Into the Labyrinth by somebody. This is a YA progression story, progression fantasy story. Didn't know it was YA going into it. Very clearly is. YA, man, I'm sure there's YA out there that I like. Maybe I've read some here. Sorry for the dog barking in the background. I don't have time to stop it. And it just showed. The writing style was just bad. I can't say anything. Jonathan Bierce, is that his name? John Bierce? And yeah, I just can't get into a book that has that horrible of writing. 95, Bookshops and Bone Dust. I just wasted most of my time. By Travis Baldree, the next up in the Legends and Latte series, but it's a prequel that didn't feel like it knew what it wanted to be. It felt like it was like, oh, let's do, that one was so successful, let's try another one, but that book didn't have an ending that needed to be written, so let's go back and do a prequel story, but you already know where the character ends up, so there's no stakes in it, and then there's no like building up of this like store like the first one did. It was like a character just trying to like, is a convalescence. 94. A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I feel bad that like a lot of my low tier books here are like really famous books. But yeah, this one just didn't work at all. The writing style can really throw me off. The writing style is very beautiful to some people. To me, it didn't work because it didn't have any descriptions. We just glossed over so much time. And then the time that we did spend on certain things were things that I didn't really care about. It felt like I never really could get pulled into the story or the characters because it just like sped through everything. 93, City of Stairs by somebody. This is the first book in something, but I don't have time. I didn't write it down. But yeah, this story had so much promise. I really like the premise of the story of these like gods that died and the people that worshipped them lost all their power, so the city crumbled, and they're finding out that another god is alive still, and this huge mystery story, really intriguing. But it just lost the steam and ended up losing me as the reader as the story went along. 92 is Macwenle Rumble. Macwenle? This is the third book in the 𝐒𝐿 series. I just talked about the last one in it. This one kind of lost me. It was all about battles. Just went to like an arena. Felt like the character got to the arena to do the Pokemon battle thing way too early in the story. That should be like the end. And it lost all the fun of adventuring, catching these 𝐒𝐿 or Pokemon. And it was just battle. Battles weren't great. And for a book with battles, I'm going to get better at this, I swear. 91, Waybound. This is the final book in the Cradle series by Will White. Super disappointed that I had to give the final book in this 12-book series. I think it's 12. One of my favorite series of all time. I just felt like the ending fumbled so badly. You'll have to watch the review to find out because I ain't got time to talk to you about it. But it was a miserable failure in an ending execution for a wonderful fantasy series. Beep? Should it beep? Feels like it should beep. It beeped. Speaking of popular authors that I was disappointed in, number 90, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. This is the third book in Brandon Sanderson's secret projects. Now, I did like a lot of the secret projects. I did not love Nightmare Painter. It's my least favorite of the group. I don't like Brandon Sanderson's romance. And this was Brandon Sanderson's attempt at a whole story of romance. I hate the subplots of it when he does it. To have a whole book about that, not good. God damn. It's driving me crazy. Number 89, Age of Assassins. Another assassin story that didn't really have a lot of assassinations going on it. From an author that I really like that now I'm forgetting who it is because I don't have time to think about it. But yeah, just not fun. And I need fun. I need fun in my stories, at least a little bit, especially for a story that's not doing that epic scope where there's all this world building to kind of suck into it. It's really a character plot story. And when the plot's really boring in those stories, then where am I going with this? This isn't 30 seconds. This is like a fake 30 seconds. Can somebody verify that this is actually 30 seconds? Because it doesn't feel like it. 88, Waylander. I gave this a 2.5 stars. It's one of the very few 2.5 stars that I gave. This is by, who is it? David Gemmell. It felt like the David Gemmell books. I read the first 3 in the 𝗟𝗏 series. I liked the first one, Legend, but then they all felt like kind of the same book. Different, but like kind of the same thing. And I'm not looking for that in a book where it felt like there's this interesting promise to 𝗟𝗏 where it's like all these stories set in totally different times of this empire, like some early, some late, all mixed up. I need to learn how to do this. 87, Shadow of the Torturer by somebody. And I read this book wrong. I gave it 2.5 stars. I thought it was something. I thought it was a fantasy story. It wasn't. I thought it was a book that I could read the first one and get some kind of feel to it. It wasn't. Apparently, you have to read like the whole series and like study it the whole time and take notes and like join discussion groups to figure out what's going on. Not my kind of story. Not my kind of story, especially when I'm doing a review channel where I read a lot of books and I don't like have a lot of time to sit there and just like study a single individual book to death. Maybe I would have liked this earlier in my life. Not now. Nailed that one. 86, Tower Lord, 2.5 stars. I loved Blood Song by Anthony Ryan. That's the first one in this. Everyone told me the second, third, and fourth or so of the books are not good. They're right. This one went multi-POV. Felt like the first story, Blood Song, ended where it needed to. You'll hear Blood Song way later in the video. But then this one didn't need to happen. It then went multi-POV. Why? It needed to keep telling a story that didn't need to be told. Why? And the story was not as interesting as it could have been. Why? I just don't understand why this book was written. 85, The 𝐒𝐿𝐥 by Josiah Bancroft. Josiah Bancroft wrote the Books of Babel, which I thought were good, not great. And I was looking forward to this because I liked his writing style. And it's like, oh, if you could just kind of fix some plot issues, I'll like it a lot. Didn't fix it here. Gave it 3 stars. The first of the 3 stars here. It's about a husband and wife detective duo that have magic. Interesting plot. I have a wife. I love hearing about this kind of thing. But it just didn't go anywhere. Didn't grab me. The magic system, not great. The characters, okay. Plot didn't really go anywhere. And I didn't like it. Number 84, Gunmetal Gods by somebody. And I feel really bad about this one because the guy gave me a bunch of free copies to give to people on my Discord. We had a buddy read of it. Really wanted to be hyped up about it. But yeah, it just kind of went in weird directions. I really liked the premise of it. You had this POV story from people on opposite sides of this war. Love that concept when it worked with good execution. As the story went along, I kept getting kind of more faded and faded into the story. Didn't like some weird directions that the plot went. I'll get better at this. I'll get better. 83, The King Beyond the Gate. This is the second book in the Dry series. This one felt like a carbon copy of Legend. Why? Maybe the publisher was like, hey, Legend worked, do it again. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. David Gemmell, don't do it. And people love David Gemmell. People love all his stuff. Not everybody, clearly, but because I'm somebody. But yeah, I don't understand why. Just do different stuff, and maybe it'll work. And that's my 30 seconds. Hey, there it is. 82, Sword of Destiny. This is the first, I think, full story in the Witcher series. Now, the Witcher series has a couple short story collections. Then they do epic fantasy scope. Didn't like the epic fantasy. I wanted back to the short stories, which is weird because I like epic fantasy, but I didn't like it at all. The characters I don't love in this. I like the short little format. I wanted the game in written format, and I didn't get that here. I got an epic fantasy that I felt like lost a lot in translation maybe, or culturally. 81, Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 1. Gave this 3 stars. I feel bad about this because Christopher Ruocchio is awesome. I love the Sun Eater. Love, love, love the Sun Eater. You're going to see it way later in this video, multiple of those books. But I don't really normally love short stories. Now, I know this is very hypocritical of me because I just said The Witcher, I wanted the short stories. But I'm a complicated guy. I got complicated tastes. But I wanted more of the Sun Eater that I'd come to know and love. Not these little kind of really short little stories. Didn't work for me. Number 80, His Majesty's Dragon. This is the first in the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik. Gave it 3 stars. And everything's 3 stars from here on out until I say otherwise. Let's just save time doing that. This is about a dragon school where this character or driving battles. It was almost like Napoleonic era, but if Napoleonic era had dragons. Weird concept. I love dragons though, but they were the most unfearsome dragons I've ever read about. Felt like a YA, let's all work together to beat the bad guy story. 79, Snuff. One of my lowest rated Discworld books that I've ever read. Snuff, I feel like, was written at a point where, sadly, Terry Pratchett's mental health started to decline. It kind of showed here, or maybe my mental health is declining if I don't know that that's true, but I think it was declining at that point. And it just was all of the things in Discworld that I loved weren't there. The things that I didn't love were there a lot. Some of the characters just weren't the same as I knew them to be, and it just kind of had this weird aspect to me. 78 is Babel. This is not the Books of Babel, but Babel by the author of The Poppy War. Is that the author of The Poppy War? I think I could be wrong there. Was that really racist to me if I got the wrong Asian author? But yeah, it just had these themes of racism just beating me over the head. I didn't need, spoon-fed me when it could treat me a little bit smarter than that. I don't know why it decided to go that route. And the plot never really took me the way that I really wanted it to take me, and felt kind of boring throughout the whole thing. 77 is The Cloud Roads. This is by Martha Wells. Martha Wells, famous for writing the Murderbot Diaries. Murderbot Diaries? Is that what it's called? And yeah, this one's a standalone fantasy story. Don't have time to tell you what it's about, but it's like these beasts that... I don't have time for this at all. It pulled me in from the beginning, lost me throughout. And a standalone story's really got to be fire for me to really like it. And this one didn't have any of that fire going into it. Just kind of felt dull to me. 76, The Frugal's Wigger's Guide to something. It's way too long. Sanderson's second book in his thing that he did this year where he released 4 books. This one was like trying to be Terry Pratchett, but it wasn't funny. And that's really what Terry Pratchett's books have going for him. Sanderson needs to stop trying to be funny. Now, I don't think he'll ever do that. I think he'll do more funny because people are like, yeah, you're super funny, Brandon, keep doing it. But it's not my style of humor, and humor is subjective. 75, Untethered Sky. This is a book, I think, by Fonda Lee. I really like Fonda Lee in the Jade City, Jade War, Jade whatever, Jade Legacy series, Greenbow Saga. This one just, the premise was cool. It just like went way too fast. And it was like such a small little story that could have been like a grander scope. And it was like, this author's clearly trying to just, I feel like, make money off a little standalone book that didn't take a lot of effort. 74, Blood of Elves. This is the second short story collection, I believe, of The Witcher. This one I thought was okay. I liked the first one a lot more. The short stories just didn't work for me as much. I liked the idea of the short stories, but these ones felt a little half-baked. And maybe it was like my place of mind. You know, I read this out of order. I read the first standalone or short story. Then I, for some reason, went to the epic fantasy and I messed up. And then I went back and read this one. And it just kind of threw me off. And I was kind of soured by The Witcher. And I decided not to read it anymore. 73, The Gate of the Feral Gods. I think this is the 4th book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. And I love Dungeon Crawler Carl. I can't wait to read more of them. This one didn't hit the same as the others for me. It felt like there was too much going on in the story for me to enjoy it. I didn't get to find those characters that show up in a book and then disappear, who I come to like know and love throughout the book. But here they just kind of show up and they leave really quick after a few pages. I wanted more of that fun interaction that I would get. And it felt like too much plot crammed into not a big enough book. Nailed that one. 72, Hyperion. This is a book that everyone told me to read. It's one of those like classics of science fiction. And yeah, it was short stories. Some of the short stories worked. Some of them didn't. The book just ends. Just hard ending on a cliffhanger. I hate that. Especially when I'm not like super motivated to read the next one in the series. So it's like, I kind of wanted to know what happened, but then I'll just like, felt like I would be better off just going and reading the Wikipedia page. 71 is The Stand by Stephen King. Gave this a 3.5. This is the beginning of the 3.5s. This is so popular. Some of my favorite authors tell me this is their favorite book. And I don't quite get why. Way too long. I like long books. Look, I've read like a 2,000-page book this year, and I loved it. But this book just was so long of just characters talking to each other for no reason other than characters to talk to each other. It took so long for the plot to start. God damn it. 70, Jade Shards by Fonda Lee. This is a short story collection surrounding the Greenbone Saga. Greenbone Saga, as I mentioned previously, is something that I truly love. But I wanted more of that big story, but I didn't get it. I got these little teeny stories that had a little bit to do with the story. It felt like it was trying to tie all these little knots that didn't need to be tied. It felt like fan service from the beginning to the end. I don't need fan service. Just write a good book. Write a different thing in the Greenbone Saga that needs a real story, but this one didn't need to be written. 69, Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. And yeah, this had a really interesting premise. I liked the idea of this book. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'll ruin the central premise of this. It's a thriller. Now, I don't read thrillers. Maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe I'd like some of them. There was moments of this book where I couldn't stop reading it. But it just kind of felt like there were too many dumb moments. And the plot just kind of didn't go where I wanted it to go. It went in a weird direction. That had this, like, it could have been good. 68, The Three-Body Problem by Zhixin Liu. You're going to hear more about the three-body problem later, but this is my least favorite of the three-body problem. Remember Earth Past is the series, and it's just so weird. There's so many weird things that happen. The end of the book is fire, and it got me really excited to keep reading it. Thank God it wasn't the beginning that was fire and then the ending sucked, or the middle, because the beginning and middle of this was strange, and it's hard to get into the series. Stick with it, though, if you end up reading, because the second one is amazing. 67, this is the beginning of my 4 stars. I rate things really high. This is The Trials of Ashmount, and this is a book that I read because the author, who I can picture, but I can't think of the name right now, is John Palladino. Really cool guy on booktube and talks to lots of people, hangs out in my Discord. I was like, let me give your book a shot. Multi-POV, kind of amateurish writing. Really interesting plot, though. I do kind of want to keep going in the series, even though it didn't, like, super grip me, but it's good. 66, Dead Man's Walk. This is the first non-fantasy book. No, that's not true. One of the non-fantasy books that I read this year, and this is in the Lonesome Dove series. Now, I reviewed Lonesome Dove last year, and it was, I think, my favorite book that I read last year. And then so I was like, let me read the series. Well, this is an interesting story that had some really moments that it was like, this is just as good as Lonesome Dove. And then the second half happened, and it was very much not. And ended up downgrading the book significantly based on what I read. Number 65, The Grey Bastards. I talked about The True Bastards later, which I did not like. This one, really liked. It's about these orcs that have this interesting political dynamic where the humans are repressing them and making them live together and fight each other to survive. Really grim story that just kind of gripped me from the beginning and didn't let go. It was a fascinating story that I just wish the series continued the pace of that first book. 64, Comanche Moon. Comanche Moon is another in the Lonesome Dove series. I like this one a little bit more. Had really interesting dynamics between the Native Americans and the white man in a way that I haven't really read that style before. Very intriguing. Had some of the same characters that I come to know and love, but some of my favorite characters from Lonesome Dove just weren't there. And so the character writing wasn't as good, the plot not quite as good, and yeah, just I'm glad I read it. 63, The Lesser Devil. This is by Christopher Rocchio in the Sun Eater series. I love the Sun Eater. This is one of my favorite novellas that I've ever read. It had so many good moments, but it had these moments of like dealing with Catholicism and this in a way that I didn't really like. I love the character that went around. I love that we got this other backstory of a character that kind of left the story from the main series. Overall, really liked it, and it made me really appreciate novellas. Number 62 is The Fall. This is the first novella in the Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. And this is a story I keep thinking about after I read it, because I'm right now reading the third book in The Faithful and the Fall. No, not Faithful and Bound and the Broken. And I always mix those up. And this is a story that like tells the prequel story. And when I was reading, I didn't really know anything about it. But now that I'm hearing so much about it in the real story, I want to go back and read it. And I feel like I'd give it a 5 stars. But yeah, it's really good. Serves so much good background. I just kind of wish I read it right before reading the next book. Number 61 is The Way of Edan by Philip Chase, fellow booktuber, awesome guy. And yeah, this is a good book. And it's like this classic fantasy story told in a newer way. Really fun takes on religion and the way that it kind of impacts the world. I could tell the story's getting more epic in scope. Kind of felt like at the time that I didn't want to read more in the series, but now that I'm done with it, I keep thinking about it. And I kind of want to read that next book in it and find out what I'm missing out on. 60 is The Last Wish. This is the first short story collection in the Witcher series, and yeah, I liked it. It's not what I expected it to be. I didn't know it was going to be a bunch of short stories, and when I read it, but then I started reading it, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. It's got some short stories that I recognize from the video games a little bit, and I loved the side of Geralt that I didn't get in the video games necessarily. And yeah, I really got invested in these stories. They were like the right length. Not too short, not too long, stayed their welcome, and a good story. 59 is Legend. This is the first book by David Gemmell, at least the first one in the 𝗟𝗏 saga. And yeah, it's good. It's an awesome siege story with, epic characters doing epic deeds. Almost felt like it could have been longer. I didn't quite give it 5 stars. I feel like it's just written in such an older style that doesn't necessarily work for me. It's got some weird tropes, weird ways that it treats women that I don't love, kind of an old school way. And a really good book. 58 is Death's End. This is the final book in the 3 Body Problems series, which it's commonly known as that. It's actually Remembrance of First Past. Really good book. Loved the first half. Thought the first half was such an easy 5 out of 5. Unfortunately, the back half is not. The back half is a 3 out of 5 at best. Just very odd. I felt like the book should have ended. It didn't. Just kept going and stayed its welcome a little bit too long. And number 57 is Dragonfired. This is the final book in the, I don't know what the series is called. Look at it over here. And yeah, it's a good book. And it just had an ending that wasn't perfect. It's not as funny as the initial book Orconomics that I thought was really well done. The Dark Prophet series, Prophet, P-R-O-F-I-T. Yeah, just not quite as funny. Interesting plot. Still really good book, though, and I like the series quite a lot. 56 is The Black Tongue Thief, and by something Buellman, I think. And yeah, everyone was telling, this was a big hit a year or two ago that I was late to the party on. And God, I think this book was one of my favorite that I've read this year up until the halfway point. I say this about a lot of books in the 4-star category where there's so much promise, either in the first half or the second half, but the other half not quite as good. This one, the second half is so dramatically worse than the first one, at least for me. Although I've heard other people kind of say similar things, but I will be very much reading the next book. Number 55 is Of Blood and Fire. This is the first book in the Bound and the Broken series by Ryan Cahill. I feel bad giving this one so low because the next books are so fire. And fire, I did not mean to make that part of the title of this book in my comment. But yeah, it's just an old school fantasy story written new. Didn't do anything super special. Copied so many other things. But I heard from so many people that it gets better. Oh, it does. And you got to read it. It's good though, but just not incredible. 54 is Forge of the 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐾. This is, I think, the 4th book in the Path to Ascendancy series by Ian.C. Esmont, which is like a prequel story to the Malazan Empire in the wider Malazan world. Good book. Not as good as the other ones, though. Kind of went in a different direction than I wanted, but that's fine. Some wild plots that didn't totally work for me all the way, but had a really good time. Didn't have any idea where the story was going to go. I just like Ian.C. Esmont as a writer, and I don't think he can write a truly horrible book if he really tried. 53, Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. The author, I believe, that I talked about earlier with the Divine City series. And yeah, this is a good one. I feel like the magic system here, which I don't have time to talk about, but it was like Brandon Sanderson-esque. Really well done. Fun mystery story. Kind of like almost like a thriller style in fantasy, but not quite to that level. But yeah, overall, very solid book. I didn't keep going in the series. I might, though. 52, Winter Solstice. This is, I think, the 4th book, maybe the 3rd in the Wandering Inn series by Pyra Abba. Huge Wandering Inn fan. This is a good book. It had a couple plot threads that I didn't love. It took way too long trying to talk about Christmas and this Christmas subplot. I felt like the pacing was a little bit off. Had some weird choices in when the chapters showed up and when they didn't. But overall, really good. I love The Wandering Inn. The Wandering Inn can't be bad. Number 51, To Ride Hell's Chasm, the first book that I've ever read by Janny Wurts. It won't be the last, though. This is a really fun book. Very interesting mystery story that I didn't guess at all. Love the main protagonist of the story and his very kind of weird background that he has that nobody, even the reader, really knows about. The last third of the book didn't quite get as good as I wanted it to. I felt like there were just some strange decisions that could have been done a lot better, but I love Janny Wurts as a writer. Number 50, The Sword of 𝐭𝐮 or 𝐒𝐮. By M.L. Wang. I liked this one. I gave it 4 stars. I read this as part of a buddy read. Really fun book that I felt like just overstayed its welcome a little bit. I felt like if the book ended at like the 2/3 of the way mark, I probably would have given it a 5 out of 5 stars. But it felt like it spent like a third of the book wrapping up the story, and it was just too long. It's not a very long book, but I love the story. It felt a little kind of more YA in nature, but I liked it. Number 49, Carl's Doomsday Scenario. I think this is the second book from Dungeon Crawler Carl. Didn't quite have the magic of the first one. I'd say that there's 2 main plots on this. There's 2 floors that Carl's on as he descends into battling through these dungeons. The first one I thought was decent. The second one I thought was awesome. It just didn't quite capture that fire that I had in the other ones. Still really good stuff, and man, I am so high on Dungeon Crawler Carl. 48 is Silverthorn. This is the 3rd book, I think, in the Riftwar saga by Raymond D. Feist. I really like Raymond D. Feist. He's probably my favorite author that wrote books in the 80s. I know he kind of extended past the 80s, although maybe that's not true, because I really like The Black Company as well. But this is just great epic fantasy, and it has this awesome, like, multi-dimensional world thing to it that I didn't see coming that's awesome. 47, Fire and Song. This is the 2nd book in the Warform Stormweaver series by Bryce O'Connor. That's a mouthful. And yeah, the first one was so good. The second one was just good. It's just mainly just battle after battle after battle, and these characters in like these mech warrior suits. The writing is not great, but man, the plot is just, it hooks me. I like to have fun in my stories. In this book, it doesn't get a lot more fun than this. Now, there are major writing problems here, weird relationship stuff. The plot didn't quite go where I wanted it to go, but fun. Number 46 is The Spider. This is the 2nd book in the I don't remember the name of the series, by Leo Carew. Super underrated series. The first, third to half of the book was okay. The second half was great. I love the world here. I love the characters here. The plot is just very intriguing. It has so many things that I love about it that feel like Game of Thrones-esque. Not quite to that level, but really fun stuff that more people need to check this out. 45 is Republic of Thieves. This is the 3rd book in the, Liza Locke-Lamora series. Gentleman Bastard is what it's called. It's my least favorite of the 3, which says a lot because 4 stars is really good. I did a reread on this, did an audiobook, love the audiobook. But yeah, it's just a weird plot where it deals with like rigging a political election, and everything just goes way too fast. And I don't get a lot of what I wanted out of it, and the characters were a little bit dumber than I wanted them to be. 44 is The Iron Prince. This is the first of my 4.5s. This is the first in that Warform Stormweaver series. This really sets the stage. Hooked me right from the beginning. I mean, this is an addicting series. This is progression fantasy, maybe not at its finest, but at its most addicting. Just finding out every time this character levels up and what moves did he get and what does that impact. This really like zero to hero story that's so obvious from the first page, but nonetheless just makes me excited to keep reading. And yeah, just super, super addicting. And if you like progression fantasy stories, you've probably already read this, but you got to read this if you haven't. 43 is Magician Master. This is the 2nd book in the Riftwar saga by Raymond D. Feist. I thought that the book started off so slow and weird, but once this major trigger happens that I don't want to ruin, the book right-sized, and it got everything that I loved out of the initial Magician book. Now, I think these books initially were combined into one book, and I think if that was the case, I probably would have overall loved it, and it would just had a down, quarter of the book. But yeah, good stuff, and I'm hooked on the series. 42 is Empire in Black and Gold by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Another 4.5, the last of the 4.5, my favorite of the 4.5s. And yeah, this is great. And this is a very cool epic fantasy that not enough people are talking about, with like these bug people that are in this epic story and this fight for survival, the huge political maneuverings. Everything's kind of getting set the stage here, with a promise of great things to come. And they do, because the 2nd book shows up much later on in this video. 41 is Battle Mage, the first of the 5 stars. 41 5 stars. I love books. Battle Mage is a book that I got recommended to read for me through Patreon. And yeah, it's great. It's a standalone book, although it won't forever be a standalone. I know it was intended to be a standalone, but the author has since told me that they're writing a prequel and a sequel, so that's cool. And yeah, it's really good stuff, really intriguing. It's so underknown, and more people need to read it. I don't have time to tell you what it's about, but check out my review. Number 40 is Queen Among Ashes. What I've said is that I think it's the first novella that I ever gave it 5 stars. This is part of the Sun Eater series. 𝐬𝐞𝐢𝐴 is just an amazing writer. He knocks it out of the park pretty much every time that he tries, although the little Tales book that I talked about earlier wasn't, but those don't count. But yeah, this is awesome. And it took everything that I loved about the first novella and then took out the weird stuff that I didn't like with the religion and inserted even cooler stuff. Just awesome, awesome, awesome. Write more stories like this, 𝐬𝐞𝐢𝐴. 39 is Gods of the Weirdwood. This is by R.J. Barker, the first in a new series of his. The series that he wrote before this was *𝐻𝐼𝐿D, which I gave 5 stars to each of those books. And one of them is going to show up here soon as well. I see the teleprompter already popping that one up. But yeah, this is a very interesting, like Lost in the Woods kind of fantasy story. Like an interesting, like tribal thing going on there with crazy stuff going on with religion. Really fun stuff. More people need to check this out. 38 is Best Served Cold. This is the first of the standalone books by Joe Abercrombie in the First Lost series. This is my reread. The first time I read it, I gave it a 4 stars. Second time, I loved it. Gave it a 5 stars. I went in with the right expectations this time. It's an awesome revenge story. You're not going to get some epic story, epic scale that you're going to get in the first one. It's just a character that has revenge, has to kill like 8 people, and they're going to go knock them all off one after the other with interesting twists and turns along the way. Great stuff. Really, really fun. I can't wait for the movie. 37, The Bone Ship's Wake. This is the final book in R.J. Barker's series of The Tide Child, which I just kind of briefly talked about. My least favorite of the group, which is not great that the final book in a trilogy is my least favorite, but it's 5 stars, so that's good stuff, right? It's just, I love R.J. Barker's writing. He knocks it out of the park. I love ships. Man, I love boats in my stories. This is all about boats. The ending, the last 50 pages is weak, though. It just felt so rushed. If it was planned out a little bit more, I feel like it would have been good, but that's his writing style, and that's what he does. 36 is Trust of the Emerald Sea, which I thought was for sure going to be my favorite of the secret projects. It's not. We'll talk about the next one on that list. The last one, the last of the secret projects, not on this list. But yeah, Trust is an awesome story. Got a very Princess Bride feel. Princess going to rescue a man. Really cool flip of the normal script. A very lighthearted Sanderson story, which I feel like I don't get enough of. Really fun magic system. Really cool twist that I didn't see coming. And just Sanderson at his finest. Not his finest. Fine. 35, Magician Apprentice. This is the first in Raymond D. Feist's Rift Door saga. This one blew me away. I just couldn't believe that this series was as good as what this book was. I mean, it's just so wonderful. I mean, how are more people not talking about this as one of the greatest fantasy stories of all time? It's better than The Lord of the Rings, to me. Not to you, clearly. Most people don't agree with that. But just everything about classic fantasy done to perfection. Number 34 is The Sunlit Man, the final of Sanderson's secret projects. This one is about a character that we know and love. If you read Stormlight Archive, I don't want to ruin it if you've not. It puts the pedal to the metal from the first page to the last. It's one of the most action-packed stories that I've ever read, and coming from Sanderson, who likes to slowly build up stories. Just an awesome change of pace. Felt like this was a lot of Sanderson saying oh, I can do that. And for the most part, he did. And just really kept me excited. I flew through this one, as I'm sure most people do when they check this thing out. Number 33 is The Exile. So another book that's a novella that I gave 5 stars. I think I gave 2 of them. So my 33rd favorite book of the year is a novella. What? And that's because The Bound of the Broken is awesome. And this story introduces a character, maybe not introduces, but talks about a character who is maybe my favorite in the whole series. It's a whole book about him. Awesome. And the people that he loves. Awesome, love them too. And his backstory, love hearing that. And it made the next book all the better because I got to know about this awesome badass. Number 32 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I did this as part of a buddy read. I don't normally love sci-fi, but man, I love this one. I can't wait for the movie to come out when it does, because it's certainly going to be a movie. This is made to be a movie. Audiobook was great for this, for obvious reasons if you've read this. I don't want to say why, though. Just super fun. Don't even want to say anything about what the story's about, because you got to go in blind to make it worthwhile. But when you do, it's just so rewarding. I have some criticisms, but not very many. Number 31 is The General of Israel. This is I think the 5th or 6th Wandering In story. This one's good. This one's really good. And it's quite frankly great. The first half was good. The second half was incredible. It did something that I didn't think 𝗏𝑕𝑟_𝑎𝑏𝑎 was capable of doing. I don't want to say what it is. In my spoiler review, which you should check out, I talk in depth about what that thing is. But it just made me appreciate this author all the more, that she had the guts to pull off what she was able to pull off in this one. Number 30, The Dark Forest. This is the second book in that Remembered First Past series by Cixin Liu, the first one being The Three-Body Problem. This is so well done. Now, the writing style is not great to me. Maybe a lot got lost in translation, went from Chinese to English. The concepts here, oh my God. It's had an impact on my life and the way that I view outer space, the way that I view aliens. It's very... maybe the scariest book that I've ever read. Not jump scares, but just like impending doom kind of scary. And just so bonkers. Number 29, 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City. This is by K.J. Parker, not R.J. Barker, but K.J. Parker. They should do something about that. That's too similar. These books are all really fun. And it's just all three of these books in the trilogy are just wild. They're about a character rising up to do something that he should not be able to do. They're witty. They're fun. They're logical in the way that this character kind of thinks about the world, and puts a really fun twist that you would never expect to happen. Number 28 is A Practical Guide to Conquering the World. This is the third book in that trilogy. These books are kind of standalones, though. They're loosely connected. I like the bigger scope of this one. I mean, this is a character in this one who is a lowly translator who then goes on to conquer the world. How does he do that? You'll have to find out. All of these books, like, something will happen, and you're like, how could this possibly make sense? But by the end of it, you're like, yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's really fun going along this journey with these characters that are much greater than you would ever expect that they would be. Number 27, The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. I did a reread of this, and this is better than the first book. I feel like I'm one of the only people that says that, because this book has a couple weird things in it with like weird sex scenes in it that are awkward. But besides that, it's great. And if you read them with a certain mindset of like, this character's probably lying, it's a lot better. And for fun. But the first book has so much slow build-up that felt very YA. This one did not. This one just hits the ground running from the beginning. 26 is The 11th Cycle by Kian and Ardalon. What I've said is the most underrated book that I read this year, because almost nobody's read it. This has got a very Dark Souls vibe to it. He's very much going for that. It's got really fun multi-POV, really dark, which is cool. If all of the books I read were really dark, I'd be really sad and depressed. But to read them every now and then, just awesome. Some really interesting concepts here that just blew me out of the water and horrified me when I read them. Number 25 is How to Rule an Empire and Get Away with It. This is the second book in the Engineer series. What is it called? I don't think it's called Engineer series, but the one with the 16 ways to defend a walled city. This one, did I mix them up? No. This one is about a guy who ends up impersonating the king because the king died, and he is an actor, and so he plays the king, but then he finds out real quick that he can just be the king because nothing can stop him at this point. Really fun concept, and what he does with that is really fun. Number 24, Empire of Silence. This is the first book in Christopher Ruocchio's Sun Eater series. You've heard constantly how much I love the Sun Eater, and this is the one that started it. This is one of the weaker ones in the Sun Eater series out of the main books. Probably the weakest of the main group, which is saying something. For my 24th best book, I just love Ruocchio. This series, I feel like, is going to go down as an all-time great when it finally ends up getting wrapped up, and you need to get on board the boat. Number 23 is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinneman. I've already talked about some others here, and this one just rocks. It's my favorite of the group. No, is it? No, it's not quite. We'll talk about the next one. But yeah, this sets up the stage with this just bonkers concept of this intergalactic game show watching Earth and these characters having to kill each other and all these different beasts and aliens trying to traverse all these dungeons, a la kind of like Diablo-ish, but with this like video game style of like progression, picking up weapons, getting stat boosts, fun stuff. Number 22, the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook. This is the third book in Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's just slightly better than the other one. Didn't need all that build-up to try to tell the story. Just kind of got right into it. Told a really fun story that I didn't know that I needed to be told. But it just worked. And I thought it was too narrow of scope, but I'm reading it. I'm just sucked in. The characters here are just awesome. Love the characters. Probably my favorite side characters out of any of the Dungeon Crawler Carl books. Awesome stuff. You need to be reading Dungeon Crawler Carl if you haven't done it yet. Number 21 is The Blade itself. This is a reread. I've been doing a read of all the First Law books. Currently reading one right now, actually. But yeah, this is better than I remember it. The first one, I felt like initially I read it, I think I gave it a 4 stars. It was like, where's the plot going? But now that when you finish the trilogy and you know where the plot's going, and you can see these things getting set up in the first one, it's got all that ingenious writing that Abercrombie has. He never got really better, I feel like. He just kind of stayed the same amazing person. And now you get it. And so it works so much better. Number 20 is The Captain. This is the first in a new series by Will White called The Last Horizon, a story about a magician pilot in space who has these crazy powers that you find out about in the first book, who's going to collect a team of all these like awesome people that need to be on his ship. And it's just fun. It's so fun and well written and exciting and awesome and funny, and everything that I would want out of a book exists here. Number 19 is The Justice of Kings. This is the first in the Empire of the Wolf series by Richard Swan, I think is who it's written by. I might have got that wrong, but I think I got it right. I didn't know that I would like this kind of thing because it's a mystery story that's kind of darker, kind of got some horror aspects to it. All those things I don't really love. Well, I like darker, but horror, no. Mystery, no. This one, yes, it just worked. Sometimes you take these things that shouldn't work and you mix them together and you stew them up, and it's just... Number 18 is Dragonfly Falling. This is by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is the second one in that Shadows of the App series, and this is so much better in every way. It's not like the writing's better. It's just like everything was set up in the first one, and then now we're getting to knock the dominoes over. Now we're getting that epic scope that it was promised. Now the characters separating into different parts of this continent and doing their own thing in the true epic fantasy. You know, think of like Wheel of Time, think of Lord of the Rings, where you actually get these different stories that kind of come together and diverge and work really, really well. It's awesome. Number 17, Before They Are Hanged. This is the second in the series. I think this is the second one in the First Law series, and another one that I liked more. It had this interesting plot in the first one, the first time I read it, where it's like, why did they do this thing where they are on an adventure and then the adventure ultimately doesn't matter. And reading it again, it feels like now I understand why it happened. Now I got to love these characters. Now I didn't have an expectation, and I just got to enjoy it. Number 16, The Last Light. This is one of the Wandering In books. I get them all mixed up now. In fact, I get a lot of like the stories mixed up because this was not truly written to be individual books. It's a much wider series that's being converted into books from ebook format. This one's just really, really fun. It introduces some characters that were new, that are some of my favorite characters. Just these, you know, almost like full books of these characters because this book's so long. It's like 1,500 pages or so. Just really fun. Read The Wandering In. You owe it to yourself. Number 15 is The Veiled Throne. This is the third book from the Dandelion Dynasty. My least favorite of the 4 Dandelion Dynasty books is the 15th best book. And that's because this series is, I think, my second favorite series that I've ever read. And I read all 4 of them this year, and you're going to hear more about them later. This one's just as good as the other ones, except it's got this weird, like, Iron Chef subplot, which sounds really strange. It is. I get it. It makes sense. The themes kind of all tie together. It's just not as good as the rest of the book. Number 13 is The Howling Dark. This is the second book in the Sun Eater series by 𝐿 Roughio. And this just took the first one and blew me away. The first book felt sci-fi. This one felt the first one that felt kind of science fantasy. It had these crazy moments. One moment that actually legitimately made me cry. That doesn't really happen to me normally in books. Almost never. And when it happens, it's just awesome and truly memorable. I love the direction that they went with the aliens here. The dynamic that the main character has with other things that I wish I could talk about, but I can't. Number 13 is The Wolf by Leo Carew. This is the first book in the Under the Northern Sky. That's what it's called. I missed it earlier. I got it this time. Yes, go me. And yeah, this is like, why aren't more people talking about this? It felt like everything that you'd want out of like A Song of Ice and Fire. Well, maybe not everything, but it's amazing. It's just such good writing, such good plot. Like from the beginning, you're so hooked in on what's going on here. Awesome different point of views from both sides of this conflict. Great stuff. Check out The Wolf. It is incredible. And I did not set my timer, but that was 30 seconds. Number 12, The Tyranny of Faith. This is the second book in the Empire of the Wolf series. 2 wolves back to back. Maybe more wolves will come. We'll see. And yeah, I thought Just the Kings couldn't be matched. This one matched it. It exceeded it. I mean, the first one ended and it was like this really isolated story that took place in like one town. And then it ended and it's like, oh, but we have this big thing to go on with the Empire. Now it's happened. Now it is truly an epic story. And to take all of the amazing bits of the first one and then make it more epic, which is my thing, that works. And it worked really well. Number 11, The Will of the Many by James Islington. I think the last book that I read this year was The Will of the Many, or close to the last book. Certainly the last 5-star. Is that true? I don't know. But yeah, awesome stuff. I can't wait to read more of the series. It's like this old Roman-inspired story, but in a new kind of writing style. Awesome kind of mystery going along that you're trying to uncover. Great epic scope to it. Amazing characters. Totally addicting. You're so invested in everything. We are at the top 10, folks. We are at the top 10. And number 10 is Of Darkness and Light. This is the second book in the Bound and the Broken series. I love it. It's just, this is where it's at. This is the epic fantasy story that I needed to be written, where I felt like they're not written anymore, where it's truly enormous in scope. Tons of characters, tons of plots going all over the place, everything amazing, everything you'd want out of an old school story, written newer, just perfect and addicting. Number 9, The Lies of Locke Lamora. This is my second time I read it. I'm obsessed with this series. I'm obsessed with this book in particular. I love the characters here. The plot is good. The plot's really good. But the writing, so good. The characters, incredible. I love this crew of thieves that work together, that are hysterical, but not trying to be. And, way too smart for their own good. And trying to do a big heist. And it's ultimately a big heist book. Number 8, Red Seas Under Red Skies, the second book in the series. When I first read this, I was disappointed by the second one. I gave it 4.5. I read it this time. What was I missing? Ultimately, I kind of figured it out. You can watch that in my review. But yeah, it's got boats. What more needs to be said? Elijah Locke Lamora with boats. Sign me up. But I saw where the plot was going in this one. I mean, I didn't see it in the first one. It ended abruptly, but I get it now. It makes more sense. Now that I get it, I love it. Number 7 is The Last Argument of Kings. This is the final book in the First Law trilogy. One of the best endings to a trilogy that I've ever read in my life. It just tied things together so perfectly, but not tied together in that perfect little bow that you get in a lot of books and a lot of movies where you're like, oh, everything makes sense now. Everything's good. Not everything's good here. In fact, things are quite bad. And I love that. But it's what I think is the perfect ending to a story. And something that other authors need to take note of when they're writing great endings. Number 6, Blood Song. I talked way earlier in my video about the second book in the series being so much worse. This one, perfect. Don't read the next one. Read it, though, because it can be read as a standalone. It should be read as a standalone. The next book shouldn't exist. It should have been like the end of the series, and you would have loved it. Just great. It's got that kids growing up in a battle academy, but not YA. and then going on and moving on to actually achieve what they were trying to do, all wrapped up in one little book. So much action in one little book. Number 5, Demon in White. This is the 3rd book in the Sun Eater series, and again, the series just amplified itself even more. It's hard to make books better than this. By far the best sci fantasy story that I've ever read. The writing is just magical. More people need to be reading the Sun Eater. They need to get on board because the series is special. And this one is unanimously, I think, thought of as the best of the bunch, at least of the ones that I've read so far. I still need to read the next book in the series, and oh boy, I can't wait to read it. Number 4 is The Wall of Storms. This is the 2nd book in... Is it the 2nd one? Yes, this is the 2nd book in the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu. And this is the first one felt like it was a prequel. This is where the story started. And it's just, it's magic. I'll never forget this story. It will go down as one of the greatest stories that I think has ever been written. Certainly one of the greatest series that have ever been written. Just slows things down. You get to feel the characters now. And it's just... Number 3, The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker. A story that I was nervous going into because I love Malazan so much. And they say, if you love Malazan, this is the one story that feels similar. Now, it's not the same. It's very different. Much more religious, much more holy war, much less monsters, but it's amazing. It's dark, it's bleak, and it's awesome. And I can't stop thinking about it, and I can't wait to keep going. How have I put off the next one so long? I need to read it. Number 2, Speaking Bones, the final book in the Dandelion Dynasty. A book that just wrapped up things in a perfect way. It's rare for me to say that a series gets wrapped up to perfection. I've only said it a few times in my life. I said that the First Law did it. I've said Malazan did it. And the Dandelion Dynasty did it. I didn't see the ending coming. It's beautiful. It's a tearjerker in many ways. And it's just something that I will never forget, and I can't wait to read again someday. And if you've been doing the math, that leaves one Dandelion Dynasty book left, and it's the first book in the series, The Grace of Kings. And I wish the last book was the best, but it doesn't have to be, because the first book is just this amazing prequel story that goes even faster than the fastest book that I've ever read, faster than The Sunlit Man, which I talked about earlier. It's just pedal to the metal. Incredible. Somehow you're feeling these characters throughout it. An awesome retelling of a historical event in ancient China. It's incredible. And top 3 or so favorite books that I've ever read in my entire life. I'm done. There are my 110 books. Hope you enjoyed this video. I need to go drink some water or something. Thank you so much. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗟𝗏𝗀cie, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Harry B, Joe, Cat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.